Welcome to Rise Untold, where the stories behind the spotlight come alive. On Tuesday, September 16th, Robert Redford, the legendary actor, Oscar-winning director and founder of the Sundance Film Festival, died at the age of 89. His passing marked the end of an era. Redford wasn't just another movie star. He was a man who changed the shape of Hollywood, from All the President's Men to The Natural, from The Great Gatsby to directing Ordinary People. Redford embodied a generation. And through Sundance, he gave countless independent filmmakers a voice. But his story, as complete as it may look, will forever be intertwined with one man: Paul Newman. For audiences, Newman and Redford weren't just actors. They were brothers on screen, companions off screen, and symbols of loyalty in an industry built on competition. And yet, when Newman died in 2008, Robert Redford's reaction was so quiet, so restrained, that it left many wondering why. This is the truth behind Robert Redford's silence on Paul Newman. Their story began in the late 1960s. Redford was talented, but still climbing. Paul Newman, by then, was Hollywood royalty. He had already won over audiences with The Hustler and Cool Hand Luke, and his blue-eyed charm made him untouchable. When the studios prepared to cast Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, they wanted another established star beside Newman. Robert Redford didn't fit their vision. He was too untested, too unknown. But Paul Newman saw something the executives didn't. He fought for Redford. He insisted that the young actor wasn't just good enough. He was perfect. Redford would later recall, "The studio didn't want me. But Paul said, I want to work with an actor." That meant everything to me, because that's how we both saw the profession, not as stardom, but as craft. That decision changed the trajectory of Redford's life. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid exploded at the box office. The pairing of Newman as the quick-witted Butch and Redford as the reserved, deadly Sundance Kid became legendary. The film won 4 Academy Awards, and from that day on, Newman and Redford weren't just co-stars. They were a team, but their bond wasn't about being identical. In fact, they couldn't have been more different. Newman was the elder by 11 years. He was sharp, organized, disciplined. Redford had a quieter energy, a guardedness, and yes, a tendency to show up late. On The Sting, their second masterpiece together, producer Michael Phillips recalled Newman finally snapping. He called Redford out, saying, "What are you, a movie star?" In Hollywood, that kind of moment could end a friendship. But for Newman and Redford, it did the opposite. It built trust, because honesty, not flattery, was the foundation of their bond. That honesty often came wrapped in humor. Their legendary prank war is still talked about today. On Newman's 50th birthday, Redford sent him what looked like a dream gift: a Porsche. But it wasn't new. It was crushed, mangled, and delivered on a tow truck with a bow. Redford expected laughter. Instead, weeks of silence passed. Then, one day, a giant wooden box arrived at Redford's home. Inside was the very same Porsche, compacted into a cube. Newman had struck back. Redford later turned the cube into a garden sculpture, and neither man ever spoke of it again. That silence, too, was its own joke, a reminder that their friendship was unspoken, unforced, and eternal. Off the screen, their lives diverged. Newman devoted himself to philanthropy, donating millions through his Newman's Own food company. He also poured his energy into racing, carving out a second career on the track. Redford, meanwhile, began directing, winning an Oscar for Ordinary People. He started the Sundance Film Festival, forever changing how movies were made and discovered. Yet, no matter how far their paths spread, they always circled back to each other. They searched for years for a third film to match the magic of Butch Cassidy and The Sting. Redford developed A Walk in the Woods with Newman in mind. But time had other plans. Newman's health began to fail. The role eventually went to Nick Nolte, and the reunion the world had waited for never happened. Redford later admitted that this was one of his greatest regrets, that he couldn't share the screen with Newman one last time. By then, their bond had become something deeper than Hollywood could capture. They weren't just colleagues or co-stars. They were neighbors in Connecticut. They were confidants. They were two men who understood the fleeting nature of fame and who chose instead to value trust. When Newman grew ill with lung cancer, he wrote one last letter to his old friend. It ended with words that cut straight to the heart. "You were the Sundance to my Cassidy, always." When Paul Newman passed away in 2008, the world expected Robert Redford to speak volumes. The media prepared for heartfelt interviews, long essays, maybe even a public memorial. But Redford said almost nothing, just a single quiet statement. "I've lost a true friend. My life and this country are better because of his presence." And then, silence. That silence confused many. But the truth is simple. Robert Redford didn't believe their friendship was for public display. He didn't believe grief should be packaged for cameras. To him, Paul Newman was more than a headline. He was a brother, and brothers don't need to explain their love to the world. Over time, Redford shared small glimpses of their bond. He spoke of Newman's wicked humor, of his fierce generosity, of his unmatched work ethic. He admitted that Newman had taught him as much off-screen as on it, but he never revealed everything, because some things are too sacred to share. Now, with Robert Redford himself gone, the silence takes on new meaning. The story of Newman and Redford is no longer just about two men who made movies. It's about a friendship that survived fame, ego, and time, a bond strong enough to be felt even in silence. Think of it this way. Paul Newman gave Redford his big break. Redford gave Newman his trust. Together, they gave the world two unforgettable films, countless laughs, and a blueprint for friendship that outlived the spotlight. So when Robert Redford stayed silent, it wasn't emptiness. It was presence. It was love. It was the final unspoken line in a script only the two of them could write. If Paul Newman could use his power to lift up a younger actor when no one else believed, if Robert Redford could honor that gift by keeping their bond private and sacred until the very end, then maybe that's the lesson for all of us. The greatest friendships don't need applause. They don't need explanation. They don't need the approval of cameras or the stamp of history. What they need is something far simpler, yet infinitely harder to find. Two people willing to stand by each other no matter what. Through the laughter that comes easy. Through the fights that leave scars. Through the years that test patience and loyalty. And even through silence when words would only cheapen what's already understood. That was the essence of Robert Redford and Paul Newman. Their friendship wasn't built on contracts or careers or the spotlight. It was built on trust, on honesty, and on a quiet loyalty that didn't waver when the world was watching, and didn't falter when the world wasn't. Redford's silence after Newman's death wasn't emptiness. It was respect. It was his way of saying, this bond was ours. It belongs to no one else. And that silence speaks louder than any speech could have. Because sometimes love is best shown not in words, but in the dignity of keeping something sacred. In an industry where partnerships often crumble under pressure, theirs endured. They pushed each other, teased each other, protected each other, and above all, believed in each other. Newman once gave Redford his shot when no one else would. Redford returned that gift by guarding their friendship. From the noise of fame. This was the truth behind Robert Redford's silence on Paul Newman. And if they could, build something so rare, a bond that outlived the spotlight, that lived in jokes, in trust, in loyalty, and in silence, maybe you can too, because the real test of friendship isn't what the world sees. It's what survives when no one is watching.